Welcome, Bronco Nation, to a game review with a lot of mixed emotions. Obviously, Boise State losing in a last-second field goal, 37 to 34. And right now, in this moment, all of us are feeling that anguish in the soul from from a loss, a close loss that Boise State had every opportunity to win and did not. But in the background of that overwhelming emotions, maybe not even something that you can feel right now because of how much it hurts to lose a game that you were winning, that multiple stages in the game, even towards the end of the game, and ended up losing. But in the background, behind all of that overwhelming emotion, is the fact of what that statement means. I said Boise State lost by a field goal, a last second field goal, to the number 7 team in the country that they were supposed to lose by 20 plus points. Boise State went toe to toe with one of the top teams in the country. Now, of course, after a close loss to a group of 5 team, close win to a group of 5 team, they're going to fall a little bit in the polls, but this is a great Oregon team. Boise State exposed them in key areas and did a great job, which we're going to talk about. Offense, defense, special teams. We're going to grade every single phase of this game for Boise State and also look at the 3 keys to the game. But at the end of the day, Boise State stepped up. This is not the Oregon team that played Idaho, obviously, by the scoreline. This is not the Oregon team that played Idaho. This is an Oregon team that was 100% motivated to be in this game and gave everything they could and snuck out with a win against a Boise State team that showed that they are back. That's right, you heard me. Boise State came in and went toe-to-toe with the number 7 team in the country. And while a loss hurts, it burns in the soul, especially a program that we were 3-0 against, and now Lil Bros have their first win. Congratulations, you're now 1-3 versus Boise State, and it took a last-second field goal in a game that we not necessarily dominated, but controlled and won 3 quarters of, including the 4th quarter. Boise State scored more points in 3 out of the 4 quarters. They also put up more yards than Oregon, and if not for 2 critical errors, which we will get to, Boise State would not have just won this game, but they would likely have won it by 2 scores. Boise State was not just in this game, Oregon had to come back and get a win in their home stadium in front of their home crowd, and Boise State almost won this game. This loss far beyond derailing Boise State's season, which was never Boise State could have come into this game, lost by 70, and it would have done nothing to their season hopes. It would have made it slightly harder for them to go get that CFP spot. They would have had to maybe have some other teams not do so well, but going 12-1 in the Mountain West, winning the Mountain West championship game, that would have put Boise State at the top level of the conversation. It would have done nothing. But the fact that they came in and only lost by 3 points at Oregon, again, number 7 team in the country, means that Boise State is now the front runner for the Group of 5 CFP representative. They are the clear front runner for that position. And Ashton Jeanty's Heisman campaign just hit a new octane. It would have been awesome, of course. It would have been awesome for Boise State to win. But he had almost 200 yards on the ground, following a 200-plus yard, 6-touchdown performance versus Georgia Southern. So not only is Boise State's season well on track, this puts Boise State even clearer into contention for the Group of 5. And it's not the Group of 5 spot, but for the Group of 5 representative of those 5 conferences, to be one of those 5 conferences represented, teams from those 5 conferences represented in the CFP. It puts Jeanty's Heisman campaign into hyper-focus, which it already was. He is the clear front runner after 2 weeks for the Heisman campaign. And Boise State clearly deserves to be a top 25 program. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to be, obviously. AP poll, the way they think, the way that they vote, they're not going to put Boise State into the top 25 after a loss. They're going to punish Oregon, drop them. Boise State will probably still hang around in the conversation, but they're going to need to win Portland State and at least Washington State to probably jump up into the rankings here. But this is a Boise State team that proved on this field that they can hang with the top programs in the country, and that has not been the case. The fact that we are sitting here right now having a discussion and about to review a game that we're going to say Boise State should have won, and we're going to nitpick and call out plays that we're going to say Boise State, they should have done better in this area and they would have won the game. The fact that we are sitting here having this conversation is mind-blowing. This is not a Boise State team that went 13-0 and beat TCU last year. This is not a Boise State team that, even went 12-1 and had a big win versus a Power 4 in the Mako Bowl. This is not any of those Boise State teams. This is not even the Boise State team that went 10-3, was in the top 25, and lost to East Carolina barely at the end of the game. This is a Boise State team that went 8-6 last year, lost to UCLA, a game again that they were doing well in the first half and could have won that game, but they went 8-6, one of the worst records in program history. And the year before that, 10 wins, 10-4, but they lost the Mountain West Championship game, and it was a bad start to that season, obviously. And then 2021, they won 7 games. That's where Boise State is. That has been what has been the standard, unfortunately. And Boise State fans, we cannot imagine that because it's not what Boise State has set up as their standard. But the last 3 years, that has been the standard for Boise State. Boise State has now proven that they have turned the corner. The expectations that Boise State can go out and beat teams like Oregon, the expectation that Boise State can go out and be a top 25 program, that they can be competitive on offense and on defense, all of those questions that were out there for Boise State were answered in this game, and Boise State has proven that they are back again. It took a last-second field goal by Oregon and a couple of massive errors by Boise State to win in their home stadium as a number 7 team in the country. Boise State has named 25 programs right now after week 2, especially with there were like 3 or 4 upsets in the lower range of the top 25 that are better than Boise State. And you can't, and again, the AP will find a way to, but Boise State has proven that they are back. Now, I've hyped you up. I've talked about the positives, but we're also going to talk about the negatives in this one. Obviously, Boise State losing this game, and I am pumped to be able to have the conversation about how close a game this was and that Boise State should have won. I'm pumped to have that conversation with everyone here because, again, this is not a game that anybody was predicting Boise State to go out and win. Not very many people anyway, except for, passionate fans that were rooting from their fan side. But even me, who is a passionate fan, had to look at the analytics and say, I don't predict a win in this. And I predict a loss. 28-49 is what I was saying. The fact that I was wrong on that is incredible. And I will give the shout out here to Zebulon, Zebulon D Max, who predicted a 31-28 win for Oregon. There were a ton of you that predicted a Boise State win according to this almost exact score, but obviously you were predicting Boise State wins, so I had to throw those out. So it took me a long time. There were over 500 comments, most commented on video ever, at least for game previews. I think it was the most commented video on the channel history, but definitely for game previews. So thank you everybody for engaging. Hope that you're continuing to do that. Let me know in the comments of this video your thoughts on this game. Boise State or Oregon fans, whoever are watching, I want to know your thoughts on this game, on this team, and expectations for the season. But for Boise State in this game, it is incredible that they were this close, but they also lost, and they should not have lost this game. I know, I can't believe I'm getting to say that, but they also should not have lost this game. And we're going to go through some of the things here and grade each of these areas for why Boise State ended up with a loss in a game that they should have won. So looking at the offense overall, and I'm not going to, I've already talked for 8 minutes. My voice is already going. I'm not going to go through every single drive, every single play. Sometimes I go a little bit more in depth. I'm going to definitely hit the surface level on this. But obviously, off the back, the biggest thing that jumps out to you is Ashton Jeanty. 192 yards rushing on 25 carries, 7.7 yard average, 3 touchdowns, 2 receptions for 8 yards. And that's a big one for me, that only 2 receptions for 8 yards. I don't think he was used effectively in the passing game for Boise State. Obviously, he had a major contribution in the running game, 70-plus yard touchdown, or 70-yard touchdown run in the second half that gave Boise State an opportunity there. But there were opportunities that he could have been used more effectively in the passing game, and it didn't even seem to be a priority to use him. They were mostly using him to block, as giving extra protection. And again, and that's great that they were trying to build up that mid to deep range passing game. But remember, one of the keys for this game is don't let Oregon change who you are. And Boise State's not that team right now. They're not a air raid deep passing, and not that they were air raid in this game, but they're not that deep passing threat team as a whole. They can sometimes hit some big ones, but their main strength is that short yardage stuff, and I really feel like Ashton Jeanty could have been used more effectively in that area. However, still 200 combined yards in this game, 192 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns to follow up a 267-yard, 6-touchdown performance from last week. He now has 9 touchdowns and well over 400 yards rushing in 2 games, well on his way to his 2,000-plus yards. However, looking at the rest of the players on this roster, because once you take out what Ashton Jeanty did in this game, Boise State's offensive performance does not look as bright and shiny. Boise State in this game, 369 yards of offense overall, 221 yards total rushing. Sire Gaines had a couple of carries there, 6 carries for 22 yards, but they only had 148 yards passing, and 115 of that came in the first half. Second half, only 33 yards passing, and that was the difference. Offensively for Boise State, that was the difference. Jeanty broke off some huge runs. He had 2 touchdowns there in the second half. He did well, but it wasn't consistently running the ball versus Oregon. Oregon was stopping Boise State pretty consistently there in the second half. Again, Jeanty breaking off a couple of good runs, but they were stopping Boise State, and then Boise State themselves was going away from the run when they didn't have to. Boise State multiple times in this game, and it was definitely the biggest question mark for Dirk Cutter's offense in this game. Multiple times this game lined up in a 5 wide receiver set. None of them worked, and one of the main reasons that it didn't work is because Ashton Jeanty is the heart and soul of this offense. I'm not saying you have to give him the ball every play. You can and should pass the ball, as I've said in other videos. But if you're going to go into a 5 wide receiver set, you are telling the defense, we are going to throw the ball here. And Ashton Jeanty is not going to be a factor. And he wasn't, because they were using him to block. You are right away putting the defense in a position where they do not have to account for the best player on the field. They can pretty much ignore him and back up into coverage. And now Maddox-Madsen has to find a way to fit balls into tight coverage on DBs that are far more skilled overall, ratings and the recruiting, all that, far more skilled than the wide receivers overall that they're matching up against. And Boise State was able to find some holes, but most of the time that Boise State was able to have success passing the ball is when they were running it out of the play action, when they at least lined Jeanty up in the backfield and rolled away from him for a pass. When the defense has to account for him, when they have to line the box and put an extra defender down to cover Ashton Jeanty, you're going to get your one-on-one matchups and open up opportunities. Lining up in 5 wide, which you would think would maybe give you some one-on-one opportunities, some more passing, actually does the opposite, because now the defense can put extra defenders back into coverage because they know Jeanty isn't going to be a threat. You're basically creating almost a 3rd and long situation for yourself. You're creating a guaranteed passing down where the defense knows exactly what is coming. And it works for some offenses. I mean, I'm not saying that all offenses should just never run 5 wide. Obviously, 5 wide works, but not for Boise State. That's not what Boise State's offense is built for, and especially when you have a back like Jeanty, who draws in so much focus of the defense, it makes absolutely 0 sense for me for Boise State to do that. You saw that on one of their final drives, incomplete passes, and it wasn't helping anyway with the 5 wide and Jeanty blocking because they were still getting through to Maddox. They had their only sack of the game in that one of those final drives for Boise State. I believe that it was the drive number 7 in the second half, drive number 7 in the second half. But Boise State going into the 5 wide made 0 sense for me and was definitely a major negative that drew away from Boise State's potential. On top of that, Maddox-Madsen, not a great game. 17 of 40, 148 yards, and a touchdown. First half, really, really solid. 115 yards passing. I didn't write down what his completion percentage was, but it was pretty good in the first half. He had a touchdown pass, just an absolute dime in the corner of the end zone. Perfect throw to Camper on a flag route. It was awesome. great throw, and he was actually having a really good first half, and that was when Jeanty was also being pretty consistently successful. Jeanty actually had more yards rushing in the second half, but he was being more consistently used in the running game, making 4, 6, 7. He didn't have the huge breakout runs, but he was having the more consistent 5+ yard carries in the first half, which was opening up those opportunities in the passing game. Second half, most of the time bottled up with inside the 3, but he had a couple of breakout runs that helped increase that overall yardage number. So for the first half for Boise State, Maddox Madsen, pretty good overall. Second half, we saw the deficiencies of this offense when Ashton Jeanty is taken away. Pretty much every time that Oregon was able to bottle up and force a 2nd and long or 3rd and long situation, Boise State was put in a spot where they were going 3 and out, where they were throwing near interceptions, where Maddox Madsen was forcing the ball. It's very, very clear that when you take Ashton Jeanty out of the equation, either from being able to set up a 2nd and short or take him out of the backfield, Boise State does not have a passing game, at least that can compete with Oregon. Boise State's going to have easier secondaries to go up against the rest of the slate out here. This was the toughest one, again, ratings-wise, that they're going to have to face throughout the entire season. So I'm not saying that Boise State can't have a passing game the rest of the year, but at least versus Oregon, it showed the deficiencies of this offense when Ashton Jeanty is not able to be Ashton Jeanty. He can't be Ashton Jeanty every single play. Occasionally, he's going to get tackled for a loss. Occasionally, he's going to get bottled up and force the Boise State to go to the passing game. And it wasn't just Maddox Madsen. He had some plays where, again, he was forcing the ball a couple of times. He was really lucky not to have a pick 6 on a screen pass, or I don't know if it was a screen pass, but a pass out to Jeanty in the flat that should have been picked and taken back for a touchdown. Almost backward pass right on the edge. So it could have been even a fumble recovery there in the backwards pass. So he had a couple, but not a couple. He had a lot of bad throws, but at the same time, several of those came on putting him in a situation that he shouldn't have been in. 5 wideouts where the coverage knows you're going to throw the ball, and there was tight coverage and they're going to deflect or force an incompletion. But there was also several drops by the Boise State wide receivers. Again, it just shows that lack of chemistry, that lack of familiarity for the Boise State offense when they have to go to the passing game, because it's not been their strength. They have a lot of new faces on this offense for Boise State. They have a quarterback who's taking over as the primary quarterback for the first time really in his career, besides a half at New Mexico. And so it's expected that the Boise State offense in the passing game is not going to have that chemistry. Cam Camper, who had a touchdown, also had a drop that would have been a touchdown. I mean, the ball was pretty much right where you want it. Maybe slightly behind, but it was right in the catch window. It hit him in both hands, and you knew by his reaction that he thought he should have caught that. Couple of other clear drops. Prince Strong had a really bad game in this. He did have 1 catch for 12 yards, but he was targeted 3 or 4 times. He had a catch on the sidelines that he bobbled. It was a back shoulder throw. I think on the second deflection that he actually did have that ball. They didn't review it. It would have been close either way, but he dropped that. He dropped a first down catch on a 3rd down play that Maddox Madsen had to throw the ball low to get it away from the secondary, but I mean, hit him in the chest as he's going down, went through his arms and hit the ground. And so not Latrell Capers, but Prince Strong had a couple of bad drops in this game, and there were some other receivers as well. So it wasn't all on Maddox Madsen. Maddox Madsen didn't have a great game, but I don't think that this game, one way or the other, said anything about the quarterback competition. I would like to see what Malachi Nelson can do versus a team like Portland State. But I don't, you throw him out there in that situation, and he's young and untested, and maybe he throws some interceptions as a young, untested quarterback. Maddox Madsen, for his benefit, besides, he had like 1 play, 2 plays maybe that should have been interceptions. Other than that, he did actually a pretty good job overall of at least making the smart decision and not throwing the ball into harm's way. The Oregon secondary was really, really good. There was some uncalled, pass interference, but that happens on every play. Overall, the Oregon secondary was really, really good. There were some tight windows that Maddox Madsen tried to fit it in, and the defenders were able to come around and get the deflection. And so overall, I mean, Maddox Madsen, he didn't have a great game, but Boise State didn't lose this game because of Maddox Madsen. The Boise State offense did everything that they were supposed to do overall in this game, and gave Boise State a solid chance here with 34 points. Beyond my score prediction, beyond a lot of people's score prediction for this game. Boise State's offense gave them a solid chance. And I'd like to throw in one more thing here. They did that without two of their primary offensive linemen. And the absence of two primary offensive linemen is not an excuse for why Boise State lost this game. That Boise State's offensive line, what was still solid without them, and that's what's so impressive. The fact that Boise State was able to do what they did, that Maddox Madsen had so much time in the pocket. Almost every play, a little less time in the second half, but overall, a lot of time in the pocket. 4+ seconds almost every single play. Even on a play where there was a fumble, it was a bad snap by the center, he had time to pick that ball up, go through a couple of reads, and throw it out of bounds. And a lot of times when you see a fumble on the snap, the D-line is right there, and it becomes an actual fumble that they recover. But that's how much time Max Madsen had in the pocket, and they did it without two of their primary guys. Mason Randolph already out coming into this game, and then also Roger Carrion, and that kind of looked like a bad injury. I really hope he's okay, but he had to be carted off. And so Boise State's already at the beginning of this game, or very early on, out two offensive linemen, and they were still able to give Maddox Madsen a ton of time in the pocket, and Ashton Jeanty was still able to go for over 190 yards, 192, but almost 200 yards rushing without your two primary offensive linemen. Incredible job building up the next man up mentality. Boise State's, you could see the difference having those new guys in there. There's the fumbled snap. There were some, there's some holding calls. There were some Boise State false start kind of early on, but those settled themselves out pretty well. In the second half, you didn't really see very much of that at all, or it really wasn't noticeable in this game that Boise State didn't have all of their primary offensive linemen up front. Again, the job that Boise State has done, again, some of this goes back, a lot of this actually goes back to Andy Oblos and his recruiting, but the job that Boise State has done to build up the offensive line from, the starters in 2019 don't compare to some of the secondary guys overall. There were some good starters in 2019, but the offensive line performance overall doesn't compare to some of these guys that are stepping up in placement of the starters in 2024. And that, again, goes back to the fantastic job that Boise State has done building up this key unit. So, offense overall, there were some huge moments. There were some bad moments. There were no major negatives. There were no interceptions. There were no fumbles, so no turnovers for Boise State. Oregon was really trying to force turnovers. They didn't get any. Maddox Madsen didn't have a great game passing. Some of that's on Oregon and their defense. Some of that's on the play calling. Some of that's on the receivers. And a lot of it obviously is on Maddox Madsen. And I know that all the Maddox Madsen haters out there, because that's what it really is. I mean, you're not looking at this objectively. I know I get, called a Maddox Madsen fan and supporter, but hey, I was actually calling for Malachi Nelson to start this season. And I have multiple times said I expect at some point in this season for him to take over. So I'm not a Maddox Madsen super fan by any stretch of the imagination. However, I am a fan that relies on the facts and the data to drive my analytics. I know that was a big point for Boise State fans calling me out for predicting a loss in this game. Yeah, I'm a fan. Obviously, I'm a Boise State fan. That's pretty obvious here. But at the same time, I'm not a homer. I'm not somebody that's just going to go out there and just say, hey, Boise State's going to win by 1,000 every time. The quarterback play is going to be incredible, and I'm just going to root for whoever's out there, and I will root for whoever's out there, and I don't mean to say that. But I'm just, I'm going to predict that every single player out there is going to have the best game of their life every single time. I'm going to root for Boise State to have the best game of their life, but sometimes you got to look at analytics, and the analytics, I'm going to try and look through my bias, and they're going to give me a prediction. They're going to drive my previews and my reviews, and if you're just looking for a channel that is going to give you just the absolute positives on Boise State all the time, only the positives, and never criticize anything, never predict a loss, never call for change or shakeup when it's needed, this isn't the channel for you, and you should probably find somewhere else. But if you like honest analysis, then definitely click that like and subscribe. But again, sometimes I have to predict a loss, and when I do, I'm going to root hard against myself the entire time, and I was really hoping that I had just completely called this one wrong, and I think I did. Overall, I called this game wrong. Boise State was a different team than what we saw last week in this game. And again, offensively for Boise State, good performance overall because of Ashton Jeanty. But if you take Ashton Jeanty out, he's an A+. Ashton Jeanty by himself is an A+. But if you take Ashton Jeanty out of this game, the offensive performance overall, it's not very good. Boise State had some good moments, but overall I'm going to be grading this offensive performance as a B-. But it is not the reason that Boise State lost this game. to do that, to find out the reason why Boise State lost this game, we're going to have to proceed over to the next section. And so, if we're looking at the Boise State defense, defensively for Boise State, actually another strong performance in this game. Not a great performance last week, and that is what was driving a lot of my predictions coming into this game, is that I said, okay, I expect Boise State to be pretty good overall. I expect Ashton Jeanty to have a big game. I expect them to stop him at some point, and I don't expect the passing game to be able to pick up the slack. All of that happened. The score for Boise State, 34, is pretty close to the score that I had for them at 28. So, I mean, obviously, a couple, 6 points off on that, but pretty close to what I was predicting. That the game offensively went about what I thought that it would. The defense, however, looking at that Georgia Southern game, looking at what happened last year, seeing some of those same reflections in the Georgia Southern game, and assuming that those issues were not going to be able to be fixed in time coming into this game, that's where my main drive was in predicting a loss for Boise State, and a big loss for Boise State. Giving up 49 points was my prediction. However, the defense in this game, night and day between what we saw last week and what we saw in this week. And again, I do not think that the coaches watch my videos. I don't think that anybody of any importance out there in the Boise State world is watching my videos and going, oh man, he's got a really good point there. We should incorporate that in the game plan. I do not think that. However, I do think that sometimes the coaches see the same things that I see. And that they look at what they did well and what they did poorly. I mean, what I'm doing in this video, the coaches on their own end, that's their entire job, is to look at and review the game with the team and find out how they can improve. And so my number one key to the game was for Boise State to blitz, blitz, blitz. And it worked. Boise State did that in this game. It was a clearly conscious effort to go after Dillon Gabriel, and they had a great game. Did they give up some big plays? Sure, and that's part of the blitz. You're going to give up some big plays. You would love, obviously, as a defense, to be able to rush 3, 4 guys, one of them to get through, hassle the quarterback, plenty of guys to drop back into coverage. You would love that. You would love to not have to bring the blitz, but Boise State does. Boise State's defensive line overall is just not getting to the quarterback effectively, and when they don't, that quarterback is finding holes in this offense. So you would love not to have to blitz, but obviously Boise State having to lean into that, and when you do, you're going to give up some big plays. Live by the blitz, die by the blitz. So I was not surprised to see a couple of big plays given up. That slant for a touchdown that went after Boise State sent the casino blitz, where they literally sent everybody, leave 4 guys back in the secondary, and just a bad angle by Benesfield on that on a very, very fast wide receiver. Ended up giving up the big play and the touchdown. And I'm not upset about that. That's not reflective of the issues that Boise State has had in the secondary going into Georgia Southern and going back to the previous season. They did give up a couple of big passing plays that they shouldn't have. There was one notable deep touchdown pass that was just wide open. I believe it was on Kaneho, unfortunately. He struggled with it a lot last year and gave up another long touchdown in this one. But overall for Boise State, and also they were gifted in that last fourth quarter there, Dillon Gabriel missing 2 wide open wide receivers those should have been touchdowns. Or one of, obviously just been one touchdown, but he missed 2 opportunities to score a touchdown and put this game up by more than what it ended up being, and missed both of them. Airmailed both, way overthrown on both plays, and they were wide open. So the Boise State secondary was still porous in elements, and the second half they did a better job of stopping that blitz. But overall for Boise State, incredible improvement, night and day performance from week 1, and it was because they intentionally blitzed the quarterback, and it worked. 4 sacks total in this game, 7 tackles for loss. Offensively for Oregon, only 243 yards. So Boise State 369, Oregon only 243 yards, 221 yards passing, 109 yards rushing. Between the halves, there wasn't like a massive breakdown for Boise State. 149 yards in the first half, 133 of that passing, 16 yards rushing. Second half, only 88 yards passing. So it wasn't, again, we've seen when Boise State plays well in the first half, sometimes the secondary breaks down in the second half. That didn't happen in this game. Again, gave up a couple opportunities, and there were some more that Dillon Gabriel could have hit and didn't. But overall, secondary didn't do that. We didn't see what we saw versus Georgia Southern, where it was a real breakdown by the secondary in the second half. Only 88 yards passing. The big difference defensively for Boise State was they could not stop the run. They couldn't really stop the run in the first half either, but the sacks, there were 3 sacks, 3 out of the 4 sacks happened in the first half, masked that difficulty stopping the run versus Oregon, only the 16 yards, but that includes the sack yardage, and there was a lot of sack yardage there in that first half versus Dylan Gabriel. So 93 yards rushing in the second half, which if you take away the sack yardage, it's not that much different from what Boise State allowed in the first half. So definitely a lot of trouble stopping the run in this game, and it really didn't seem to matter what they were doing, whether they were, blitzing, whether they were playing a little bit more of a safe, whether they were sending a spy. It really didn't seem to matter. The Oregon running backs were very, very fast, getting by, breaking a tackle or just having very good eye discipline, finding the open gaps and breaking away. Boise State saved on several runs by holding calls. Oregon could not stop holding in this game. And I think that does show the effort that Boise State's putting in on the defensive line. They're forcing the offensive line to hold them to be effective. But Boise State was saved a few times by some holding calls. Otherwise, that overall rushing yardage would be higher. But overall, for Boise State defensively, really, really good game. There's negatives to pull out in this one. Obviously, there was the 67-yard reception early on. Irby really still struggling to find himself. I think he has the potential to be an outstanding defensive back here for Boise State, but just not quite living up to that potential yet. And it's expected, transferring in from Cal, settling into a new position as a primary corner for Boise State, still struggling to find himself. And I think he will, as great bye week now for Boise State to refocus and go back into the season. And then obviously Portland State and then nice easy tune-up game. So Boise State will have an opportunity for the whole team to come together and get themselves ready. And Irby and other guys that have struggled secondary-wise will have that chance. So for Boise State, they gave up some plays. Obviously on the very final play, also on Irby, unfortunately, that pass interference in the end zone didn't really need it. I mean, he was matched up pretty well. He was right there. He didn't need to hold the wide receiver's hand. He did, and he was pretty good positioning. Dylan Gabriel was kind of struggling to hit those precise balls. Unnecessary play by Irby. And, if he'd allowed a touchdown, Boise State would have got the ball back with almost 2 minutes on the clock and maybe could have done something. So, you don't want to intentionally give up a touchdown. I'm saying the pass interference was the worst case of all worlds because, again, gave them that first down when I think they would have been in a 3rd and long or 4th and long. I forget what down it was. But they would either have been a 3rd or 4th and long, or they would have scored the touchdown, and then Boise State would have had time to come back and maybe get a final drive in to tie it up and push it into overtime. So, unfortunately, and I'm not blaming this game or this loss on Irby, but again, there's some negatives to draw out on this one. But there also are some massive positives for Boise State. Obviously, the sacks were incredible. Hassanin getting his first sack of the year. Boise State nickels showing up and just absolutely dominating. They Shea Oladipo and Rodney Robinson had back-to-back sacks at the nickel position. Those two players are swapping in and out at that nickel position. And on one play, Rodney Robinson comes in and gets the sack. And on the very next play, Shea Oladipo says, hey, I was here first. I can still do all those same things. Comes in and gets a sack. So Boise State, you love to see the sacks coming from the secondary players because it shows that intentional blitz by Boise State. And so again, great plays overall, and especially in that second half, the defense stood, you can say whatever you want about little things given up here and there, and I thought it was, again, very, very solid defensive performance overall. But they stood up big when they needed to and gave Boise State back-to-back turnovers to give them a chance to go out and win this game. Forced fumble by Zion Washington, which was recovered by Notarani. And then Ahmad Hassanin forces a fumble, and Ty Benesfield recovers it. Zion Washington has just exploded into this season. Been one of the brightest spots in that secondary for Boise State. 10 tackles in this game, 1 forced fumble. He was in the top 3 tackles last game as well. He had 3 passes defended for last game, not this game, but last game. So for Zion Washington, we saw some of him last year, but he's really stepped up this season. I'm excited to see what he can do, especially when the rest of the secondary really starts to meld and mesh together, and we see a much stronger secondary in the second half of the year. Ty Benesfield, we've already mentioned him. Good game as well. 6 tackles, a fumble recovery. And Rodney Robinson had the sack and the forced fumble, and then Hassanin, like we already said, he had that forced fumble, a sack, and a tackle for a loss. So Boise State had some great guys stepping up. Unfortunately, obviously, A negative is the loss of Alexander Tubner. You really hate to see that. I know how much this game meant to him. I had a lot of family and friends in the stands watching him in this game. But his loss, I don't think, impacted the overall loss for Boise State. But it sucks to see at an individual level him go out, and obviously he'll now have to miss the first half of the next game as well. Hate to see that overall. Could it have kind of ticky-tack targeting, especially since it wasn't called on the field? There's some good points about it being a glancing blow. I know there were some Boise State players that were very upset, former Boise State players on Twitter that were very upset by it. At the end of the day, he did lower his helmet. It's so tough. I know how tough it is when the guy is sliding and you're coming down to the ground as well. I know how tough that is. It's the natural instinct, and especially when you're going to the ground to lower your head. At the end of the day, though, he didn't do himself any favors for the referees, and if he kept his head up, it wouldn't have been targeting at all. Do I think it's a bad call? Yeah, I don't think that's what the intent of the targeting rule, and especially the ability to review and add it in the review. I don't think that was the intent at all for this rule. The rules analyst on the broadcast was of the same mindset, did not think that should have been added, did not think that it was forcible contact. But again, it wasn't like they were just pulling a foul out of their pocket, so don't think, the refs were screwing us in this game. And there were a couple times where they let some stuff go. An Oregon player punched Sarah Gaines on the ground. Ref watched it, did nothing. So there were some bad calls here and there. But the refereeing is not what decided this game for Boise State. And so I did want to address the targeting there. And obviously it hurts to see him out, especially in such a big moment, but he'll come back strong in the second half versus Portland State, and excited. He's going to have a great year as one of the leaders on this team. So for Boise State defensively, the first half, it's 20-14. They only give up 14 points in the first half. And in the second half, the defense for Boise State only gave up another 9 points in the second half. The Oregon offensively only scored 23 points in this game, if I'm doing my math right on that. I'm pretty sure I am. They only scored 23 points in this game. And the defense did an incredible job beyond anything I could have imagined. I was blown away by the defensive performance in this game. Absolutely incredible. There were still issues, sure. But those issues compared to what I thought we were going to see in this game is what everybody, I'm pretty sure. I mean, maybe players, parents didn't expect to see it because, you guys always have the inside look, and obviously, you're always rooting for your kids, and they're going to have their best effort. But everyone else, fans everywhere, did not expect to see this performance from this Boise State defense. The fact that Boise State's defense stood up and did this in this game against Oregon on the biggest stage was absolutely incredible, and they all deserve the highest accommodations for their performance in this matchup. And the fact that they were able to do this versus Oregon really excites me the rest of the way out. And Boise State's defense, the fact that they were able to make those corrections gives me so much faith in the Boise State defensive coaching staff. They were able to recognize deficiencies, make the right adjustments, and come in with a game plan that almost won Boise State the game, in addition to some absolutely phenomenal individual effort by the Boise State defense. Ashton Jeanty was a one-man machine for the offense, but for the defense, everybody was out there giving it their all and almost got Boise State the win. Obviously, gave up a lot of runs, gave up some long passes, but overall, the defensive performance for Boise State was very, very, very strong. It gives me a lot of hope going forward the rest of the season for this Boise State team overall. However, we still haven't found the culprit yet. We've hinted at it. We haven't found the culprit yet for why Boise State lost this game, because it wasn't the offense, who got a B- overall. It wasn't the defense, who I'm going to give an A- to. I think that you could make a solid case for an A out of this. I think there were still, I didn't like how many runs they gave up. I thought they were pretty porous there against the run. Some big plays here and there, and obviously the pass interference call on the last play. So A-, I think, though, overall, fantastic performance compared to last week, which I believe last week, D+. So they went from a D+ versus Georgia Southern to an A- versus the best offense they will play all year long. And that, as a fan base, should have you very, very excited, because the best Boise State teams were good because of their defense. Obviously, Kellen Moore, Doug Martin, all of that. Titus Young, Austin Betts. I'm not going to name off every player on every roster for Boise State, but obviously great offenses for Boise State, but the reason that those teams were so good was because of their defenses. And I'm not saying that Boise State's defense right now is at that level, but the fact that they were able to step up and be a strong contributor towards winning this game should give you, combined with what Boise State has on offense, so much faith in this team going forward. And again, one of the reasons Boise State went toe-to-toe with a top 10 team in the country was because of their defense. And another reason why Boise State is back despite the loss. So, we have to find the culprit, because B- for the offense, A- for the defense, none of those is going to lose you the game. I think we found it here in the special teams. An absolute shock, because this special teams unit has the 2 best special teamers in the entire country right now, going off of what they did last year and what is expected of them in this season. Jonah Dalmez, who is on track to go break the kicking record, and James Ferguson Reynolds, who was the number 1 kicker in number 1 punter in average per punt last season, had a great inside the 20 average as well. So the 2 best special teamers. You have Stacy Collins, who was supposed to be the dirt cutter of special teams, coming over from the Power 4, leaving Penn State to come and do the exact same job at Boise State. Yeah, Boise State's special teams outside of kicker and punter was not very good last year. Ranked among the worst in college football. But you have Stacy Collins coming into this unit. They've got to be better, right? Someone made a good point on Twitter that this special teams unit might be worse. Not at the kicker and punter, but in the coverage. This special teams unit might be worse. Now, before we talk about the negatives, because I do always draw the positives. I did say, kind of went off on like a little tangent there. It's just been something that's on my mind. A little tangent there about saying I'm not all about the positives. I do always, no matter what performance, draw out the positives with the negatives. You're always going to get both. And so I really want to clarify on that. So I do want to draw out the positives here before we cover the massive negatives in this game. And so positives for Boise State: 2 punt returns for over 20 yards. Boise State last season had 27 yards in punt returns. Total. They had 27 yards punt returning total last year. In this game, they had 2 punts go for over 20 yards. One of those, Latrell Caples, who returned a punt to the 50 for 21 yards. Really solid return. Caught it on the run. Was able to return it for Boise State, give them great field position. And then Cooper Jones, who obviously Tim Gilligan's nephew. Tim Gilligan coming on the channel earlier this year prior to the start of the season. So Cooper Jones' nephew had a punt return, his first action as a Boise State Bronco, at least in the punt return game. He had a punt return that went for 22 yards, so he actually had the longest punt return. So Boise State combined in this game, 43 yards punt returning, more punt returns, almost twice yardage than what they had last season overall. So punt returning, huge step up. That was not a factor at all for Boise State. That is a positive. Now we have to talk about the negatives, though. And before we talk about the negatives, I do want to kind of talk about like a gray area positive negative. Obviously, Jonah Dalmez missed a field goal. It's a 54-yard field goal in a tough environment. Those are not guarantees. We like to think that any kick Jonah Dalmez takes is a guarantee, up to 60 yards, and most of the time they are. But I'm never, ever going to blame a kicker for missing a 50-yard plus field goal. It is great when they do make it, but I'm never going to look at that and go, man, it's a chip shot field goal. You should have made that because you're that good. That's not the scale. You don't adjust the scale for 50-plus yard field goals. It's great when they do, but you're not going to look at Ashton Jeanty when he isn't able to bust off a 70-yard touchdown and go, you really should have busted off a 70-yard touchdown there. Again, it's great when they do, but that's not the norm. That's not the standard. And so I'm not incorporating Jonah Dalmez's performance into the grade I'm about to give the special teams and the reason they lost. Obviously, Boise State loses by a field goal, but it wasn't that field goal. That is not the reason that Boise State lost this game. 2 out of 3 overall, long of 43. Still a solid game by Jonah Dalmez. James Ferguson Reynolds, obviously, first half wasn't great, but you got to also remember that the dude kicked 1 punt, I believe it was on the first drive versus Georgia Southern, and then sat on the sidelines the entire game. And now he's coming into Oregon Stadium here in a very, very tough environment with a lot of pressure on his shoulders and where Boise State's out on the field trying to set up field position, and the first few punts were just not very good. Okay, second half, though, really, really good job punting. He had a great punt that went inside the 10. It was a little bit more of a traditional, was caught inside the 10. And then he had another punt that was just one of those great Aussie roll-out punts, rolled out at the 4-yard line inside the 5. So overall, 46.4 yards, 2 inside the 20, which again is going, anytime he gets punts inside the 20, he gives money to cancer. There's those donations that go to the cancer research. I'll put links to that. That's a fantastic project. You should definitely support him in that. I know that's definitely close to his heart with his family. So make sure that you go and support him. I'm going to put links to that in the description. However, overall for James Ferguson Reynolds, another strong performance when you take in the total picture. And I don't blame him for having a kind of a not a great first half when it really, it's basically his first time punting in the season besides that one punt. He's kind of rusty coming in. Overall, good performance. So those aren't the reasons that we lost this game. There are two very specific reasons why Boise State lost this game. And one is a punt return and one is a kick return. And the punt return was not on James Ferguson Reynolds. He did not outkick the coverage. There was a broken tackle at the point of catch and then a couple other broken tackles or just, moving around the blocks. So everybody was there to make the tackle and they didn't. It was not, again, he wasn't outkicking the coverage. This is not on James Ferguson Reynolds. Boise State allowed an 85-yard punt return. They also allowed a 24-yard punt return. So, the 24-yard punt return, I've been coming in going, that's not great. That's going to reduce the grade. They allowed an 85-yard punt return for a touchdown. And in the same game, and I don't think this has ever happened. I haven't gone through, and I'm probably not going to. I don't care about it that much to do that. Maybe somebody in the comments will have that time to go through and look at every single game that Boise State has played and the punt returns for touchdowns and the kick returns for touchdowns that they've given and go through and find out if this has ever happened. I don't think it has. I do not remember ever seeing it happen. But Boise State, in a game that they gave up an 85-yard punt return for a touchdown, in the same game, gave up a 100-yard kick return for a touchdown. How does that happen? How does that happen? That you have an 80-plus yard punt return and a 100-yard kick return for touchdowns in the same game. Boise State's had games where they gave up a couple. I think they've had games where they gave up like 2 kick returns for touchdowns, that kind of thing. But to fail on both sides of the return game, in both the punt return and the kick return, and that is 14 points. Boise State lost this game by 3. Oregon's offense scored 23 points. They won this game 37-34. Boise State's special teams lost Boise the game. You take away those 2 massive returns. One would have been bad. One would have been like that's angling towards within a large group of other factors towards being the reason that Boise State lost this game. But you gave up 2. Again, this was supposed to be fixed. Stacey Collins is coming back in. This was not supposed to be a point of concern. I was a little concerned watching Georgia Southern. Couple of long returns, one out to the 50, but they kind of seemed to fix it in the second half. So I thought, okay, they learned they're okay. Boise State in this game, and it seemed like they had a plan. They were trying to kick it to that left side, but that did not work because Oregon, they broke one before that was called back for holding. It would have been like a 37-yard return that was called back for holding. That should have been an indication that this wasn't working. Just kick it out the back of the end zone. Just kick it. That's not a super strong wind. Just kick it out of the back of the end zone. Don't even give them a chance to return it. That's what Boise State ended up doing towards the end of last year because they couldn't cover the return. A game that Boise State was not supposed to win. A game that they were supposed to lose by a large margin. So you have to take it in the grand scheme of things. But a game that you find yourself in. A game that you find yourself going toe-to-toe. A game that you, based on your offensive performance versus the other team's offensive performance, outscored them 34-23 and should have won this game by 2 possessions, end up losing because you gave up a kick return and punt return, 2 massive returns in the special teams. Boise State has got to be asking massive questions right now in what is going on with this unit. Is it a personnel factor? Is it a coaching issue? Is it a combination? Is it inexperience? Is it a lack of understanding the game film? And I don't know. I'm not a special teams coach. But I do know I think anybody can know when they see an 85-yard punt return and a 100-yard kick return that something is drastically wrong in the coverage game. And Boise State has got to fix this because special teams, defense wins championships, right? Offense, is going to be explosive and gets you the looks and goes out and wins the games. But special teams are such a crucial factor. And when you come down to it, they can have the biggest impact, and they did today, on winning or losing a football game. And the reason that Boise State lost to Oregon, a team that they went toe-to-toe with, even though they were better than them, even though they were higher ranked than them, even though they should have blown them out and they didn't, the reason that Boise State lost that game and are not right now celebrating a top 10 win and looking forward to Sunday evening when they're going to be a top 15 program in the nation is because of the special teams. And I honestly don't know how Boise State's going to fix this, but they've got to find a way. Whether it's just schematically, we're just going to kick it out of the end zone every single time, I don't know. But Boise State's got to find a way to fix this because it sucks to be sitting here right now having a conversation about a game that Boise State won in almost every phase. They won on the offensive side of the ball for the most part. They won on the defensive side for the most part. They outscored the other team. They won in every quarter. And yet they lost in the one area that you thought was going to be the biggest strength of this team based on the personnel with Jonah Thomas, James Ferguson Reynolds, the returners, which were good for Boise State. That was not a factor. And then Stacey Collins coming in. You thought this could be the top special teams unit in the entire Mountain West. And they're looking, at least in the return game, like they might be the worst in the entire country. And so for Boise State, it's going to be an F, minus F, whatever the lowest possible grade is. Because, again, at the end of the day, there's a lot of factors that go into a loss, especially a 3-point loss. But that is the biggest critical reason why Boise State is not sitting right now with a win and sitting at 4-0 over Oregon. And so, final grading here. Keys to the game, and I've talked a lot, and I want to wrap this up. So, keys to the game for Boise State: bring the blitz, A+. Solid performance, Boise State. It didn't always work, they didn't always get there, but they did it, and it helped this secondary have the best performance that they have had, that I've seen them have in a year plus. Going back 2 seasons, this was the best secondary defensive performance that I've seen out of Boise State in a very, very long time. Incredible job overall, and because of bringing that blitz. Don't let Oregon change you. C+. We've already covered it. I thought Boise State was going away from the run. Didn't have to, especially on that last drive. I mean, they're setting up at first and 6, 1st and 5. Just keep running the ball. Keep running the ball or run the play action. Don't become something you're not by putting them out to the 5-yard. And we've 5 receiver look. We've already talked about it, but I'm gonna say C+ overall. And then make the right play, not the big play. Again, for Boise State overall, I thought they did a pretty good job of looking at making the right play, but there were times when they lined up and went for the pass when they should have just gone for the run, when they should have just tried to give it off to Ashton Jeanty, be more creative in the running game and use that over going for a bigger passing play. And some of that goes back to what Oregon was showing, and some of that I think goes back to just wanting to go out and have that big momentum-changing play. So for Boise State, I'm going to give that a B+, hovering on the edge of A-. It wasn't a massive issue, but I think there were moments when they went away from what was working, what their core was, what their identity was, to be something else for whatever reason, and it didn't work out. So Boise State in this game, really, really, really strong effort overall. Boise State is back. If they can fix their special teams, they will completely be back. I might put back with an asterisk, because Boise State special teams were always great in the past. That is an issue that's going to drag them down if they can't fix. But overall, this Boise State team is back, and they're at a point where fans are walking away from an Oregon game with a feeling that they should have won, and that is not something that we felt versus Washington. Heck, it's not even something we felt versus Oregon State a couple of years ago. This is not where Boise State has been, and now we are again, and the expectations will only continue to grow throughout the season, because what I saw versus Oregon was a group of 5 program that could win on the national scale, that could compete in the playoffs, could compete with the top teams in the country. That's what Boise State showed, and it was only by the rarest of circumstances that they weren't able to go get that win. In another scene and another circumstances, they walk away with that win. And I think you play this game 10 times, Boise State, I think they win 5 of them at least. maybe more because they dominated this. I think Boise State might walk away with a heavy favorite in that game, be 7-10, 7-3, or versus Oregon out of that 10-game series, not including previous games. So Boise State, they're back. This is a great game. This was a fantastic game to watch. It's a tough one to review, but it's also a really fun one to be able to sit back and review and say, hey, we could have won this game, and here's how we could have done it. That is an awesome feeling for a Boise State game that I thought I was going to be walking away going, okay, here's the positives that we can draw out of it. Obviously, let's kind of, look at the negatives, but I don't really think about them too much because these good things happened, and let's build on them for the rest of the year. Boise State's in a completely different position now from when they kicked off versus Oregon. The expectations are higher. There's going to be a lot more excitement for this team. Eyes are going to continue to be on them, and eventually give them a couple more games, get them to 3-1. This is going to be a top 25 program. They deserve to be one now, but it will probably take a couple games to get there. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure you let me know your thoughts in the video. What your thoughts were on the running back, Ashton Jeanty's play, his incredible performance, on the quarterback, wide receivers, on the second defense. I want to have all of that discussion with you. Again, 500 plus comments on the preview video. I want to be able to continue to have that interaction with the fan base. Again, I don't get the blessing of being able to live in Boise, unfortunately, because of my job. So this is my way, in addition to social media, but this is my primary way of being able to get to interact with all of you. And so please have that discussion with me in the comments below. Again, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for rooting on Boise State to almost a win. This was a fun one, and I do sit here getting ready to conclude this video with a lot of excitement for the rest of the season. So with everything that I gave throughout the entire video, and I might wake my kids up here, but it's worth it for this one. With everything that I gave for this throughout the whole game, every ounce of my lung energy, whatever is left here, go big, boo!